I remember sitting on Madison's front porch at midnight, clutching my small suitcase with tears still wet on my cheeks, unable to believe what had just happened. That morning had started like any other. My family shared breakfast together. Mom Dorothy made my favorite pancakes, and Dad Robert asked about my upcoming history test. Who could have imagined that before the sun set, the very people who loved me most would become my most ruthless betrayers? Truok ki toy ke cho katsban kao chuyen, nai hai cho toy biet katsban jang, ksem tu jaun he jung, quen han like va subscribe je kong, bolon hung kao chuyen, chan thok khas. Wagyo hai kung, toy quetro langay, jin men jo ki mot loy noi, doi ja thay joy hoan, toan kwak joy toy. Let me take you back to who I was before everything fell apart. I was Marissa, 17 years old, a junior at Roosevelt High School in Wisconsin. My life was exactly what you would picture when you think of the American dream. My family lived in a cozy house on Maple Street with a white picket fence and the rose garden my mother had lovingly tended for years. My father, Robert, worked as an engineer at the local manufacturing plant, while my mother, Dorothy, taught third grade at the elementary school downtown. My younger brother, Tyler, 14 at the time, spent most of his free time shooting hoops in our driveway, dreaming of making the varsity basketball team. We had our traditions that made our house feel like home. Pizza Fridays, where we would argue over toppings, movie nights, where Tyler and I would fight over the remote, and our annual summer camping trips to Lake Superior, where Dad would attempt to teach us fishing, while Mom packed enough snacks to feed a small army. I was the pride of my family, maintaining a 3.9 GPA while serving as student council vice president. My parents never missed an opportunity to brag about my achievements to their friends and coworkers. The refrigerator door was covered with my honor roll certificates, debate team photos, and volunteer appreciation letters. I had worked incredibly hard to maintain this reputation, staying up late to perfect essays, and spending weekends tutoring underclassmen who struggled with their coursework. My social life revolved around my tight-knit group of friends. Madison had been my best friend since 6th grade when she moved to town from Minnesota. We bonded over our shared love of young adult novels and our mutual inability to understand algebra. Samantha and Jessica completed our quartet, and together we navigated the complicated social landscape of high school with relatively few casualties. Recently, my world had become even brighter because Alexander, the quarterback of our football team, had finally asked me to homecoming. I had harbored a crush on him since sophomore year, admiring his easy smile and the way he always held doors open for people. When he approached my locker last Friday with a nervous grin and a handmade poster asking me to the dance, I felt like I was living in one of those romantic comedies Madison and I watched during our sleepovers. I kept myself busy with extracurricular activities that aligned with my college goals. The debate club had become my second home, where I thrived on researching current events and crafting persuasive arguments. I also participated in the volunteer club, spending Saturday mornings at the local animal shelter and helping with community cleanup events. These activities not only looked good on college applications, but also gave me a sense of purpose beyond the typical high school drama. Speaking of drama, Roosevelt High had its fair share, mostly centered around Brittany Hamilton and her crew of popular girls. Brittany ruled the school with perfectly straightened blonde hair designer clothes that somehow never violated dress code and a mean streak that could cut glass. She had been dating Alexander on and off since freshman year, and I knew she was not thrilled about his invitation to homecoming. I had always made it my policy to stay far away from Brittany and her drama, focusing instead on my studies and my genuine friendships. But Monday of that week, something felt different. As I walked through the cafeteria during lunch, carrying my usual turkey sandwich and apple, I noticed people staring at me in a way that made my skin crawl. Conversations seemed to stop when I passed by, only to resume in urgent whispers once I was out of earshot. It was subtle at first, just a feeling that something was off, like when you sense someone watching you, but cannot quite catch them looking. Madison seemed unusually quiet during our shared study period, avoiding eye contact and giving short answers to my attempts at conversation. Samantha claimed she had a headache when I suggested we grab smoothies after school, something we did every Monday without fail. Even Jessica, who normally could not keep a secret to save her life, seemed to be holding something back during our brief interaction at our lockers. The most troubling sign came when I tried calling Alexander that evening. We had been texting regularly since homecoming, sharing inside jokes, and making plans for the dance. But when I called his phone, it went straight to voicemail. When I tried again an hour later, the same thing happened. A cold knot began forming in my stomach as I wondered what could possibly be wrong. When I arrived home that evening, the atmosphere felt heavier than usual. My mother, who typically greeted me with questions about my day and offers of snacks, barely looked up from the papers she was grading at the kitchen table. My father, usually eager to share stories about his workday, remained buried behind his newspaper during dinner. Even Tyler seemed subdued, picking at his food and glancing nervously between our parents and me. As I helped clear the dinner table, Tyler pulled me aside in the kitchen and asked quietly, "Did you do something wrong at school?" His question caught me completely off guard, because I genuinely could not think of anything I had done that would warrant this strange treatment from my family and friends. Tuesday morning brought answers that I desperately wished I could unhear. Madison finally cornered me by my locker before first period, her face pale and her hands shaking slightly as she spoke. The words that came out of her mouth felt like a physical blow to my chest. A rumor was spreading through school like wildfire, claiming that I was having an inappropriate sexual relationship with Mr. James Wilson, my advanced biology teacher. According to what Madison had heard, Brittany Hamilton was the source of this vicious lie, claiming she had evidence to support her accusations. The rumor suggested that my consistently high grades in biology were not earned through hard work and genuine interest in the subject, but rather through this alleged inappropriate relationship. Brittany had apparently gone so far as to create fake text message screenshots that she was sharing on social media, showing conversations that never happened between Mr. Wilson and me. These fabricated messages contained suggestive content that made me feel sick to even hear described. The thought that people were reading these lies and believing them was more devastating than anything I had ever experienced. Madison assured me that she did not believe a word of it, but her voice lacked the conviction I desperately needed to hear. She explained that the rumors had started circulating Sunday night and had gained momentum throughout Monday. By Tuesday morning, it seemed like everyone in school was talking about it. The fake evidence looked convincing enough that even some teachers were beginning to whisper among themselves. The truth was that I had never been alone with Mr. Wilson outside of normal classroom settings. Yes, I occasionally stayed after class to work on lab experiments, but always with other students present. I had earned my high grades through countless hours of studying detailed lab reports and genuine fascination with cellular biology. The extra credit projects I completed were available to any student willing to put in the effort. But none of these facts seemed to matter as the rumor machine churned relentlessly forward. By lunchtime, I noticed students pointing at me in the hallways. Some looked at me with disgust, others with pity, and a few with what seemed like morbid curiosity. The screenshots Brittany had created were being passed around on Instagram and Snapchat, reaching students from other schools in our district. Alexander finally called me that afternoon, but the conversation was nothing like what I had hoped. His voice was cold and distant as he informed me that he could no longer take me to homecoming. He did not want to hear my explanations or denials. In his mind, where there was smoke, there must be fire. The boy I had been falling for had already tried and convicted me based on lies spread by someone who saw me as competition. My other friendships began crumbling just as quickly. Members of the debate club started treating me like I had some contagious disease. Teachers who had previously praised my academic performance now looked at me with suspicion and disappointment. Even Mrs. Garcia, the school counselor who had written one of my college recommendation letters, called me to her office for what she termed a serious conversation. Principal Peterson summoned me to his office Tuesday afternoon, where he sat across from his imposing desk with a stern expression I had never seen before. He questioned me about my relationship with Mr. Wilson, showing me printed copies of the fake text messages that had been circulating online. Despite my tearful denials and detailed explanations of my whereabouts during the times these alleged conversations supposedly took place, I could see doubt in his eyes. Mr. Wilson was also called in for questioning, and I learned later that he had been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. This development only seemed to add credibility to the rumors in the minds of those who had already decided I was guilty. The fact that the administration was taking the allegations seriously enough to suspend a teacher made everyone believe there must be some truth to the story. When I called home from the principal's office hoping for support and understanding from my family, my mother's voice sounded strained and unfamiliar. Instead of the comfort I desperately needed, she simply said, "We will discuss this when you get home, Marissa." The formal tone and use of my full name, instead of the usual honey or sweetheart, sent a chill through my entire body. The ride home on the school bus was torture. Students who had never paid attention to me before were now staring and whispering. Some had their phones out, undoubtedly looking at the fake evidence that was destroying my reputation with every passing hour. I sat alone in a seat near the front, feeling more isolated than I had ever felt in my entire life. That evening, our family dinner was conducted in almost complete silence. The usual chatter about everyone's day was replaced by an oppressive quiet that seemed to press down on us from all sides. Tyler kept glancing at me with confused and worried eyes, clearly sensing that something terrible was happening, but not understanding what. My parents barely touched their food, and I found myself unable to swallow more than a few bites, despite having eaten almost nothing all day. After dinner, my parents asked me to join them in the living room for a serious conversation. As I sat on the couch where we had shared countless movie nights and holiday mornings, they confronted me directly about the rumors circulating at school. Their questions were sharp and accusatory, lacking the warmth and trust I had always counted on from them. Wednesday brought escalation that I could never have anticipated. Brittany and her group had not been content with the initial round of lies. They had spent Tuesday night creating even more elaborate fake evidence designed to cement my guilt in everyone's minds. New photoshopped images appeared on social media, showing Mr. Wilson and me standing closer together than we ever had in reality. Someone had created a fake email account using Mr. Wilson's name and sent messages to my school email address, then screenshot these fabricated conversations as additional proof. The rumors had now spread beyond the confines of Roosevelt High School. Parents from other families were calling the school board to complain about the situation. The local Facebook groups that typically discussed school lunch menus and upcoming sporting events were now filled with heated discussions about inappropriate teacher-student relationships and the need for better oversight of faculty members. Mr. Wilson's suspension had become common knowledge, and some community members were calling for his immediate termination, regardless of the investigation's outcome. The man who had inspired my love of science and encouraged me to consider pursuing medicine was now facing the potential destruction of his career based on complete fabrications created by a jealous teenager. I had reached the point where attending school felt impossible. Every hallway was filled with stares and whispers. Former friends crossed to the other side of corridors to avoid acknowledging me. Teachers who had once encouraged my participation now seemed uncomfortable when I raised my hand in class. The isolation was suffocating, and I spent most of Tuesday night crying into my pillow while listening to my parents argue loudly in their bedroom down the hall. Madison remained my only ally during this nightmare, but even she was facing pressure from her own family to distance herself from me. Her mother had heard about the rumors through the parent network and had forbidden Madison from spending time at our house or being seen with me in public. This meant that our conversations were limited to hurried exchanges between classes and secret phone calls after her parents went to bed. Thursday evening brought the confrontation I had been dreading, but somehow knew was inevitable. My parents called a family meeting in our living room, the same space where we had celebrated my acceptance into the National Honor Society just months earlier. Tyler was sent to his room, despite his protests that he wanted to stay and support me. The serious expressions on both of my parents' faces told me that this conversation would change everything. My father spoke first, his voice colder than I had ever heard it. He explained that they had spent considerable time discussing the situation and had reached a decision that they believed was best for everyone involved. My mother sat beside him with tears in her eyes, but remained silent as he delivered what felt like a death sentence. They no longer felt comfortable having me live in their home. The rumors had damaged our family's reputation in the community, and they were concerned about the impact this situation might have on Tyler's social and academic life. They had lost trust in me, believing that the evidence against me was too substantial to be entirely fabricated. In their minds, I had not only engaged in inappropriate behavior, but had also lied repeatedly to cover it up. I dropped to my knees on the living room carpet, the same carpet where I had played board games as a child, and opened Christmas presents for 17 years. Through desperate tears, I begged them to believe me, to trust the daughter they had raised, to remember who I was before these lies began circulating. I reminded them of my character, my achievements, my plans for the future, and my complete lack of interest in any kind of inappropriate relationship. But their minds were made up. My mother finally spoke, her voice breaking, as she said, "You have destroyed everything we worked so hard to build as a family, Marissa. We cannot trust you anymore." The pain in her voice was genuine, but it was directed at me rather than at the people who had created this entire fabricated situation. My father informed me that I had 1 week to find alternative living arrangements. They would not be throwing me out on the street immediately, but they made it clear that I was no longer welcome in what had been my home for my entire life. The financial support they had planned to provide for my college education was also in question, depending on how this situation ultimately resolved. Tyler burst into tears when he overheard the decision from his bedroom, and the sound of his sobbing added another layer of heartbreak to an already unbearable situation. He had been my biggest supporter throughout this ordeal, never once questioning my innocence or treating me differently because of the rumors. Now he was losing his sister because our parents had chosen to believe strangers over their own daughter. The next few days passed in a blur of packing my belongings while trying to maintain some semblance of normal routine. I continued attending school, despite the hostile environment, because my parents insisted that I maintain my academic responsibilities. Each night, I carefully folded clothes and packed books, while surrounded by the memories of a childhood that now felt like it belonged to someone else. The photographs on my dresser showed a happy family that no longer existed. The awards and certificates covering my walls represented achievements that had been meaningless when it mattered most. Even my acceptance letters from colleges seemed worthless now that my family support system had crumbled and my reputation was in ruins. Tyler spent as much time as possible in my room during those final days, helping me pack while expressing his disbelief at our parents' decision. He was too young to fully understand the complexities of the situation, but he knew with absolute certainty that his sister was being treated unfairly. His faith in my innocence was the only thing keeping me from completely falling apart. Friday morning arrived with the finality of an execution. My father loaded my belongings into the back of his truck with mechanical efficiency, his face showing no emotion as he handled the boxes containing my entire life. The ride to Madison's house was conducted in complete silence, with both of us staring straight ahead as familiar neighborhoods passed by the windows. When we arrived at Madison's house, her mother, Mrs. Peterson, met us at the door with a mixture of sympathy and uncertainty. She had agreed to take me in temporarily, but everyone understood that this was not a permanent solution. My father carried my suitcases to the guest room without saying a word to me, then left without so much as a goodbye or a backward glance. That first night, I sat on Madison's front porch long after everyone else had gone to bed, staring up at the stars and wondering how my life had changed so dramatically in the span of a single week. The girl who had been planning her homecoming dress and preparing college applications was now essentially homeless, abandoned by her family, based on lies created by a jealous classmate. But something powerful began growing inside me as I sat in that darkness. Instead of accepting defeat, I started planning my comeback. The next morning, I made a decision that would change everything. Rather than continuing to be a victim of these lies, I was going to prove my innocence and expose the truth no matter what it took. My first step was reaching out to Mrs. Garcia, the school counselor, not as a guilty student seeking help, but as someone demanding justice. I explained to her that I wanted to clear my name through a proper investigation, rather than continuing to defend myself against fabricated evidence. Mrs. Garcia had always been fair-minded, and something in my determination convinced her to help me navigate the process of proving my innocence. We began by requesting digital forensics analysis of the supposed text messages and emails. I had learned enough about technology from Tyler's computer obsessions to know that fake messages often contained metadata that could prove they were fabricated. The school district initially resisted this expense, but Mrs. Garcia argued that they had a responsibility to investigate thoroughly before destroying 2 lives based on rumors. Madison proved to be my most valuable ally during this investigation. Despite pressure from her own family to distance herself from me, she spent hours helping me gather evidence that would support my version of events. We created detailed timelines of my whereabouts during the times when these alleged conversations were supposed to have taken place. We collected witness statements from other students who could verify that I was never alone with Mr. Wilson. The breakthrough came when Madison discovered that Brittany had been careless with one of her fake accounts. Through some detective work that would have made any private investigator proud, we found digital evidence linking the fabricated messages back to Brittany's personal devices. The timestamps on the fake conversations also revealed inconsistencies that proved they could not have been genuine. Security camera footage from the school library became another crucial piece of evidence. The cameras clearly showed my actual whereabouts during several of the times when I was allegedly having inappropriate conversations with Mr. Wilson. In every instance, I was either studying with friends, working on group projects, or participating in completely innocent academic activities. After 3 weeks of intensive investigation, the truth finally came to light. The digital forensics analysis confirmed what I had been saying all along. Every single piece of evidence against me had been fabricated. The text messages were fake, the emails were fake, even the photographs had been manipulated using readily available photo editing software. When the results of the investigation were announced, Brittany and 2 of her closest friends were immediately expelled from Roosevelt High School. The severity of their actions, including cyberbullying, harassment, and defamation, also resulted in police involvement. They faced potential criminal charges for their coordinated campaign of lies designed to destroy my reputation and Mr. Wilson's career. Mr. Wilson was reinstated with a formal apology from the school district and community leaders. His reputation had been damaged by the false accusations, but at least he could return to the job he loved and continue inspiring students to pursue science. Our first interaction after his return was awkward, but filled with mutual relief that the truth had finally emerged. When news of my vindication spread through the school and community, my parents called and asked me to come home immediately. They claimed they had always suspected something was not right about the accusations and were ready to welcome their daughter back with open arms. But their words felt hollow after weeks of abandonment when I needed them most. I made the decision that surprised everyone, including myself. I told my parents that I would not be returning home. They had chosen not to believe me when I needed their trust most desperately. They had thrown me out of my own home based on lies created by strangers, rather than standing by the daughter they had raised for 17 years. Their faith in me had crumbled at the first test, and I was not ready to pretend that everything could go back to normal. Instead, I chose to finish my senior year living with Madison's family, who had shown me more loyalty and support during my darkest period than my own parents had. Mrs. Peterson officially became my legal guardian, ensuring that I could complete my education without disruption. The arrangement also allowed me to maintain some distance from my family while I processed the emotional trauma of their betrayal. I threw myself into my studies with renewed determination, graduating with highest honors and earning a full scholarship to a prestigious university several states away. My academic achievements felt even more meaningful, knowing that I had earned them during the most difficult period of my life. The graduation ceremony was bittersweet with my parents in attendance, but our relationship fundamentally changed. Tyler and I maintained our close bond throughout this entire ordeal and beyond. He visited me regularly at Madison's house and later came to see me at college whenever possible. He became my bridge to the family I'd lost, keeping me informed about their lives while respecting my need for distance. His unwavering belief in my innocence had been a source of strength that sustained me through the darkest days. Years passed before I was ready to begin rebuilding relationships with my parents. The process was slow and painful, requiring countless conversations about trust, judgment, and forgiveness. We eventually reached a place where we could share holidays and special occasions, but the easy intimacy of my childhood relationship with them never fully returned. I used my experience to become an advocate for teenagers facing similar situations. During college and beyond, I volunteered with organizations that supported young people dealing with cyberbullying, false accusations, and family rejection. My story became a source of hope for others who felt like their worlds had ended because of lies and betrayal. The most important lesson I learned was about the difference between forgiveness and trust. I eventually forgave my parents for their failure to support me, understanding that they had been overwhelmed by community pressure and manipulated by convincing lies. But forgiveness did not automatically restore the trust that had been broken. Trust, I learned, must be rebuilt through consistent actions over time, and sometimes it never fully returns to its original strength. Looking back now, I can see that this terrible experience taught me resilience I never knew I possessed. It showed me who my true friends were and revealed character strengths that served me well throughout my adult life. Most importantly, it taught me to trust my own instincts and stand up for myself, even when the entire world seems to be against me. The question that haunts me even today is not whether I made the right choice in keeping my distance from my family. The real question is how we rebuild relationships after trust has been shattered so completely. Some bonds can be repaired with time and effort, but others leave scars that never completely fade. Maybe that is not entirely a bad thing, because those scars remind us of our own strength and the importance of standing by those we love when they need us most. Sometimes the people who are supposed to protect us become the ones who wound us deepest. But in those moments of ultimate betrayal, we discover strength we never knew we had. The question is not whether we can forgive, but whether we can rebuild trust once it has been shattered. And maybe, just maybe, that is a choice we get to make on our own terms. Have any of you experienced something similar, where people closest to you did not believe in your innocence during tough times? How did you handle rebuilding those relationships afterward? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because your stories might help someone else going through this situation right now. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more real-life experiences that remind us we are not alone in our struggles. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that they have the strength to overcome betrayal and rebuild their life on their own terms. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that your truth will eventually come to light if you have the courage to keep fighting for it. Stay strong, and I will see you in the next video.